Welcome to the Jingle Bells, the kitchen smells delicious. Keepin' it RENAL during the holidays. My name is Megan Dowling, and I am the program coordinator for the Kidney Foundation of Canada Atlantic Branch. I'm here in PEI, very cold today, but I'm so happy that you were all able to join us for today. For this nutrition webinar, and I really hope that you enjoy. So before we get started, I just want to go through a few items so you know how to participate in the webinar today. By default, you have all entered the webinar with your audio muted, and we just keep everybody muted so that we can lower any background noises, and this helps to keep our webinar flowing smoothly. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive a follow-up email about within 48 hours that will have a link for the on-demand viewing. And you'll also receive a copy of the PowerPoint slides used today. You'll notice there's lots of links in the slides, so you will receive those slides with all of those links. And in this email, the follow-up email within 48 hours, I'm also going to include a link to a survey. And we ask that if you do have any time for you to fill this survey out, it's short, it's anonymous, and it just helps us to continue improving our webinars. So if you have a chance to do so, please. Since we are all muted, you will have the opportunity to still submit questions. They'll just be text questions. So you can submit them by typing them into the question and answer pane in the Zoom bar at the bottom of the meeting window. Please try to avoid using the chat box to submit your questions. It just helps us to monitor the questions more efficiently when they are added to the question and answer box. And in order to protect your privacy, when you ask a question, just please don't put your name or provide any other personal identifying information. And if we will answer the questions at the end of the webinar, so feel free to add them in at any point. If we don't get to all of the questions at the end, I will be sure to address them and include answers in the follow-up email that I send you. So if we don't get to your question, don't worry, we'll still answer it. And I'll do my very best to answer questions, but if I don't know an answer by chance, I will definitely find the answer out and I will contact you after. So during our presentation today, we'll be using a polling feature. Polls can be used to increase interaction and gather information from participants. And so when I launch a poll, you'll see it'll pop up on your screen, and all that you have to do is click on the answer that you agree with the most or that best represents you. I've personally participated in polls during webinars in Zoom in the past. I really enjoyed them, but I must admit that I've never launched a poll before myself. So if you are new to polls, then we're in this together. So speaking of polls, let's launch our first one. We'll see if this works out for us. Okay, so I want to know which Atlantic province you're located in. You have Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and if you're not located in the Atlantic provinces, if you're located outside, you can pick that answer as well. I think most people have voted so far, so I will close it in 3, 2, 1. All right, so let me share the results here. Okay, perfect. Wow, so we have some people in Newfoundland and Labrador, also some people in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. Perfect, and I'm expecting more people to come into the webinar as we get going. So that's great, now I know that it works, and we'll have some more polls throughout the webinar. Okay. So one more thing I just want to go through before we start is a disclaimer. The material contained on this webinar does not constitute medical advice and is intended for information purposes only. So no one associated with the Kidney Foundation of Canada will answer any medical questions. Please always consult a healthcare professional for specific treatment recommendations. We will be talking about the renal diet in general terms today, but the renal diet is so incredibly specific to each individual. So not everything will necessarily apply to you. What I say in today's webinar will be tips and tricks that may be help to you, but depending on your individual situation. So in no way am I telling you what you need to do. Please always make sure that you're receiving your information from a trusted healthcare professional. And please, again, always consult your doctor or your renal dietitian before trying out anything that you hear in this webinar. Okay, so now with that said, let's see what we will be talking about today. We are going to be covering many different things today regarding the renal diet. We'll be talking about it in general terms, but since it is getting close to the holidays are approaching, I am going to try to pull in the holidays as much as I can and give you some tips and tricks around that. So we'll be first starting with talking a little bit briefly about the Kidney Community Kitchen. We'll do a brief overview of the renal diet. Then we'll go into some label reading. I'll show you some tips and tricks about that. And we'll get to practice some label reading as well. Then we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of the foods and the holidays, my favorite part. And then at the end, I'm going to give you some tips on eating healthy on a budget, as well as food safety, because that's always important. Okay. So the Kidney Community Kitchen. We know that diet plays a significant role in the management of chronic kidney disease, but we also know that trying to navigate through this eating plan can be very difficult at times. And so to make it a little less stressful, we've provided you with the Kidney Community Kitchen. And so the picture here is a picture of the homepage, and there is a link to this website on the slide as well. This is free and easy to use. It's an online tool, and it aims to make food and cooking as easy and as fun as possible for, of course, a population that has been told that so many foods are off limits. Some of the features it includes is dietitian approved and kidney-friendly recipes. We'll see a few of those as we go through the webinar today. It has a drag and drop ready to go meal plans created by dietitians. You can submit your own recipes to be added or to be reviewed by dietitians. And it has some tips, frequently asked questions, and other nutritional information about the kidney diet as well. One of my favorite features of the Kidney Community Kitchen is Ask a Dietitian. So it has this feature. The link to it is on this slide. It's an easy to fill form where you can ask any of our renal registered dietitians all of your nutrition related questions. There are definitely a few more features on the Kidney Community Kitchen. So be sure to check out the link on the previous slide to explore more. And if you have any questions, of course, you can always submit them to our Ask a Dietitian feature. Because this nutrition session is based on a renal diet, let's start quickly reviewing what exactly a renal diet is. The renal diet isn't a diet in the way that diet culture may typically define it. You know, our diet culture has kind of created a very negative connotation around the word diet. When you hear diet, you tend to think of extreme restriction. I'm always going to be hungry. I can't eat the foods that I like. all of my foods are going to taste bland, they're not going to be tasty. And then also it gives a negative connotation on how we should feel. So the word diet, we often feel some shame around that. Sometimes we can feel failure around that word. And it sounds like it's going to suck, but it doesn't have to. And that's definitely not the type of diet we're going to be talking about today. Renal diet is simply an eating plan that has been prescribed for somebody who is living with kidney disease. As I mentioned before, it is very individualized and specific to each individual. It is based on many different things, such as the stage of kidney disease you're in, your blood work results, and medications you're taking, and of course, any other dietary needs that are unique to each person living with kidney disease. There is no standard renal diet, therefore the diet can vary greatly from person to person, and it can actually change for the same person over time as well. And again, I think that really shows the importance of speaking to your doctor or your dietitian about your own renal diet. So essentially, the renal diet is an eating plan which your registered dietitian can assist you with to prevent the buildup of toxins that healthy kidneys normally clear out of the blood, to reduce the workload of kidneys, so this would be before dialysis, prevent complications that can occur from a buildup of toxins, and of course, to meet all of your nutritional needs. Like I said, there's no standard kidney diet, and managing your kidney diet needs can be quite challenging, as I'm sure a lot of you do know. Especially can be challenging when you have to balance two or more other different diets at the same time. So these would be things such as a diabetic diet or a heart healthy diet, along with your renal or kidney diet. And while the diet may be different for everyone, there are some common themes in it. And this would include things like restricted sodium, potassium, phosphorus, low or high protein needs. And some people may actually require a fluid restriction as well. And again, a registered dietitian can help you to develop a nutrition care plan that is individualized and meets your specific needs. If at any time you're having troubles contacting or getting in touch with a dietitian in your facility, it's always an option to reach out to us, and we can do our best to point you in the right direction. So now that we know the basics of a renal diet, excuse me, let's talk a little bit about labels. So this is a nutrition facts table, and this is your friend. Labels can be confusing and they can be very intimidating for many, but today we're really going to break them down and I'm going to help you to be able to use them more efficiently and for them to not look so intimidating. I could spend so much time speaking about labels, but for now, I'm just going to share a few tips and tricks that you can use to help understand the nutrition facts table a little bit better and what it's telling you. So first, up there on the top right, you'll see the serving size. The serving size, it doesn't indicate how much of that product you should eat. It's not telling you the size or the amount of that product to eat. It's simply the amount that the other numbers in the table are based off of, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. One thing that you do want to remember about this serving size is that when you are comparing two different products, you want to make sure that they have a serving size that is similar so that you are making the correct or an accurate comparison. If one label said 1 cup per 1 cup and the other one said per 1 cup, that would be great. You can compare those, no problem. If, for example, you had this label with per 1 cup and you had another label which said per 2 cups, then you can always double the numbers of the first label so that they match up with the the serving size for the other products. So just always want to look at the serving size, make sure that they're similar so you're making an accurate comparison. The next thing that people tend to look at when they look at labels is the calories. And you'll notice that I don't talk much or focus much on calories. And this is simply because they don't give us enough information about the food. We'll focus much more on the nutrients that are below the calories. And this is because it's more important to understand where the calories in the food are actually coming from, rather than the amount of calories in the food. So we want to focus on things like whether calories are coming from saturated or healthy fats, if they're coming from complex carbohydrates or sugars, things like that. So we want to focus on where the calories are coming from, not necessarily just focusing on the number. And you'll notice below that, there's lots of different nutrients, and they're represented by two types of numbers. One is the weight or the amount of the nutrient that is in that serving size, and one is the percent daily value. When using a label to make a quick decision about nutrients, in a general sense, I personally find it easier to look at the percent daily value. There are absolutely situations when looking at the actual amount of nutrient in a product is important. So looking at the grams, for example. But for today's purposes, we're just going to focus on the percent daily value. Might seem a little confusing, but I promise it's very easy. So the percent daily value, or percent DV for short, tells us if a food has a lot of a nutrient in it or a little bit of a nutrient in it. So some people get confused by these and they start adding up the percentages on the label, but we don't want to do that. All we want to do when using the percent daily value, all we're looking to do is to determine whether or not a product has a little bit of a nutrient, so a little bit of sodium, or a lot of a nutrient, so a lot of the sodium. So to do this, I just need you to remember two numbers, and those numbers are 5 and 15. We'll get into this a little bit more. I'll give you some examples, but to explain just the background of it, if the percent daily value is 5% or less, that means that there's just a little bit of nutrient in that product, or a little bit of that particular nutrient in that product. If the percent daily value is 15% or more, it means that there's a lot of that nutrient in that product. Now, there's always that gray zone of between 5 and 15%. If a percent daily value falls in between there, it doesn't really mean that there's a lot of it or a little bit of it necessarily. It's okay. I just tend to judge it on whether or not it leans more towards 5% or 15%. So to help you visualize this a little bit more, here's a diagram. And now some nutrients we want more of, so above 15%, and some we want less of, so below 5%. In general, we want less of nutrients such as sodium, saturated fat, and sugar, and more things such as fiber, calcium, and iron. Now, I do want to caution you, however, as whether or not you need more or less of a specific nutrient is completely individualized and specific to you and your situation. So again, please speak to your renal dietitian before looking for more or less of a nutrient. But now that we know what the percent daily value or percent DV is, let's look at some labels and put it into practice. Okay. So you'll see this label on the slide here. And what I'm asking is, does this product have a lot or a little amount of sugar in it? Now, I have a poll for this that I'm going to launch in a second here. I'm not sure if it will cover this screen, so just quickly take a look at the amount of sugar in that label, the percent daily value. And let's launch this poll here. Okay. All right, so I want you to tell me, does this product have a lot or a little amount of sugar in it? Now, this poll is anonymous, so don't worry. This is our first time doing it. Nobody's going to be judged for their answer. Just let me know. Okay, so you guys are quick. Most people have answered already. So I will close the polling in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so everybody got it right. You are correct. Let's see here. Yes, so a lot of sugar. So you'll see the red square there is around the 22% daily value. That is the daily value of the sugar in this product for that serving size. And you can see sometimes it's easier to visualize it with a diagram. The arrow there is above the 15%, so there is a lot of sugar in this serving size of this product. Let's look at another one. So this is a different label, and I want you to tell me if this product has a lot or a little amount of sodium in it. So let me launch this poll again. There you go. So again, this is anonymous. So tell me, does this product have a lot or a little bit of sodium? Again, you guys are pretty quick at answering. That's good. All right, so I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. You're right. So this product does just have a little amount of sodium. So again, I put a circle there around the percent daily value that we were looking at. We were looking at the 3%. And in the diagram, you can see that is below 5%, of course. So we would consider this to just be a little bit of sodium. So this is a great way when you're at the grocery store. I know in the pandemic right now, we're trying to avoid the grocery stores and trying to spend the least amount of time in them possible. So, you may not want to be picking up a bunch of products and looking at the label. But if you have something at home, or if you by chance can see the label, you can always look at this and, just remember those two numbers, 5% and 15%. But again, I just want to caution you, every renal diet is very specific to the individual person. So of course, any tips and tricks I'm showing you today, please run them by your doctor or your renal dietitian, just to make sure that they are okay for your situation. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of foods in the holidays. So we're going to start with a bit of a more popular topic, which is baking. And so baking has become very popular during the pandemic. And so we spoke about the renal diet already, and we spoke about some things that you might want to be a little mindful of, which can be intimidating. So, some people think, should I bake? Am I not allowed to bake? Or shouldn't I be baking because I have so many restrictions and so many things to watch for? But absolutely not. In fact, sometimes it's even better to be making your food at home, because then you can ensure you're consuming kidney-friendly foods if you make them yourself. If you're making them yourself, you know exactly what's going into them, and so you actually have way more control. Some food, or a lot of foods that are store-bought or pre-prepared, are also high in sodium, potassium, and phosphorus, which are some of the nutrients that you may need to monitor with kidney disease. But depending on your requirements, by making them at home, you can control exactly what goes into your food. So with that, of course, I have another poll. And I want to hear from you guys. So like I said, baking at home has been really popular during the pandemic, but also just making food at home in general has been more popular during the pandemic. So I want you guys to take a look at this poll and let me know if since COVID-19, have you been in general making food at home more or less? Or have you just been kind of, haven't been affected by it in the sense of making food the same amount of time as you would have before the pandemic? I'll just give you a few more moments to answer. I know myself, I have definitely been making food more at home since COVID-19. I cooked a lot at home before, but not having that option necessarily to go out as much as before, I have been making more food at home. Okay, so I will end the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so most people, as expected, said that they are making food at home more since COVID-19. Nobody said that they're making food at home less. And a few people said that it hasn't really affected them. They're making the same amount of food at home as they did before COVID-19. Awesome. Thank you guys, by the way, so much for participating in the polls. And let's get to it. Okay, so like I said before, we're going to start off with baking. And now, of course, some ingredients cannot simply be taken out of a recipe without drastically changing the taste, consistency, and ability to rise. And because of this, you may simply just need to make some ingredient substitutions. And so the first thing we're going to be talking about with baking substitutions is leavening agents. So leavening agents are added to foods such as cakes and pastries to help them to rise. But the thing about them is that they can often be high in phosphorus, potassium, or sodium. Baking powder, a common ingredient used in baking for rising, is typically high in sodium and phosphorus, but it is possible to make a phosphorus-free baking powder. And you can see there on the slide, I have a little recipe for that. And so all that you want to do is sift together a 1/4 cup of cream of tartar and 2 tablespoons of baking soda. Once you do this, it makes about 6 servings. So, and a serving would be considered like a tablespoon. It's about 6 tablespoons of phosphorus-free baking powder. And this can be stored in an airtight container at room temperature for about up to a month. But you do, of course, need to be careful, just like with everything else. There is potassium in cream of tartar and sodium in baking soda. So although this particular baking powder recipe is low in phosphorus, it still does have some sodium and potassium. So again, you always want to make sure what you're looking for is correct. You want to talk to your dietitian, your doctor, and make sure that your nutrition requirements are being followed by any kind of recipe. So there is also, you can find low sodium baking powder, but again, you need to be careful because it can be high in potassium. Dry active yeast is a pretty good alternative for a leavening agent because it is sodium and potassium free, and it's low. It contains low amounts of all of the other ingredients that you typically have to watch if you're following a renal diet. But again, always check the nutrition facts table. We looked at that earlier. Check that. Also check the ingredient list as well, and choose according to the nutrition requirements that fit you. Okay. So now that we have leavening agents out of the way. Let's talk about some other foods that we typically use when baking, especially around the holidays. So recipes for things like cookies, muffins, loaves, and cake, they often call for salt, but most of the time, the salt in these recipes can be decreased or actually left out. Often there is plenty of sodium in the other ingredients that you're using for baking. So typically it still will work out if you decrease or completely leave out the added salt that the recipe asks for. And the other ingredients in the food that would contain sodium are things like the baking soda and the baking powder. Another thing you want to watch for is the amount of dried fruits, nuts, or chocolate chips that are used in treats, as these tend to be higher in potassium and phosphorus. So of course, we don't want to eliminate them completely if we don't have to. So you can always try cutting them down a little bit using a smaller portion of them in your baked goods or your treats. You can also try adding things like fresh berries or pineapple pieces to bring on that sweetness. Another thing, if you're concerned about raising your blood sugar, maybe you're following a diabetic diet on top of your kidney diet, renal diet, instead of using white sugar, you can try cinnamon or pureed pears to add some of that extra taste to it and sweetness. And if you're interested in foods like muffins, pies, and crisps that contain fruit, try lowering the try the fruit choices, that have lower potassium in them. So this would be things like blueberries, rhubarb, apples, cranberries, and lemon. The Kidney Community Kitchen, the online tool that we spoke about earlier, it has excellent recipes on there, lots of them for delicious desserts that are tailored to the renal diet. So be sure to check that out. And on each of their recipes, they let you know if it's high or low in some of those important nutrients for the renal diet. And we will be looking at some of those recipes on the next slide. So definitely check out the Kidney Community Kitchen for that. Another thing that you can do is to add a few tablespoons of ground flaxseed to your muffin or loaf recipes. This will increase the amount of fiber in them, which we know is good for our heart and our digestive system. Fiber also has some of those omega-3 fats in it. And of course, we know that those make our hearts happy. So I personally really like adding flaxseed to my muffins and loaf recipes. I don't tend to taste it. I don't think many people do taste it in their recipes if they're not using too much. So that's definitely something that you could try out. And if you're looking to lower the fat content in a baked good, try cutting the amount of oil or fat in the recipe in half and then replace it with unsweetened applesauce. Non-hydrogenated margarine can also be a substitute for butter in some recipes. I actually do this quite often. I personally like the taste of margarine better, so I always have margarine in my fridge. And so instead of going out to the grocery store to buy butter, I typically use margarine in a lot of my recipes, and it works for me. Now, some of my avid bakers out there may disagree and may say that butter is a must for your baking, but margarine works for me, and so it may work for you as well. Just something to consider. As I said, I promised we would be going through some recipes. So all of these recipes that I'll be showing in the presentation today, they are from the Kidney Community Kitchen. This is a cranberry nut bread. It looks delicious. And as I said on the website, they do let you know the nutrient content of the recipe for some of those nutrients that you typically need to look at when you are following a renal diet. So this one, it is low in phosphorus, sodium, and potassium. And the link is on the slide here. Another one, I had to include this because the picture looks amazing. It looks delicious, and I love crisps. So this is an apple and blueberry crisp. Again, it's low in phosphorus, sodium, and potassium, and the link is on the slide for that there. One more, had to include it because it has cranberries in it, and cranberries always remind me of the holidays, but the apple and cranberry cake. So again, like the other ones, this is low in phosphorus, sodium, and potassium, and the link is there on the slide. What's really great about the recipes on the Kidney Community Kitchen is that they taste good, with still following some of the nutritional requirements that you may need to follow during while you're on a renal diet, which is really, really great, especially, you know, if you're the one who cooks a lot for your family. It can be really hard and really time consuming to make two completely different meals for your family or two completely different desserts. So it's really nice to have an area that has all of the recipes that, you know, can follow within your diet that also taste delicious so that you can share them with the rest of your family. Now we'll get into some holiday dinners, and also some snacks as well that are common during the holidays. So a few things to be mindful of. If you choose to use canned vegetables and fruits, there's nothing wrong with this. You just want to try and choose those with no added salt or sugar. And if this isn't possible, then that's okay. You just want to make sure that you drain them well and give them a really thorough rinse. For some people, root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and turnip are a staple in holiday dinners. For me, they're definitely a staple in my holiday dinners. And if this is you and you need to watch the amount of potassium that you consume, try the double boiling method. And of course, you know, sometimes you want to choose those specific foods just a little bit smaller portions if they are high in some of the nutrients that you need to be monitoring. So the double boiling method is super easy. All you need to do is wash, peel, and dice or thinly slice the vegetable, bring it to a bring it to a boil, and then you want to drain the water out, put some fresh water in there, boil it again until, you know, it gets soft or tender, and then drain the water from that as well, and that will help to get rid of some of the potassium in there. But again, you always still want to be careful. So I spoke about nuts a little bit earlier when talking about baking, but they are not only used in baking, they're also a really common snack to munch on, and not only around the holidays, they're very common, they're also quite nutritious. But nuts are often salted and they can contain potassium and phosphorus as well. So you want to choose unsalted nuts if you are able to eat them. And again, you always want to look at the label and read the other nutrients in there. Look out for the potassium and the phosphorus. But you can also snack on things like unsalted pretzels and popcorn as well to make sure that you're still getting that nice crunch. And another food that kind of comes out a little bit more around this time of year is oranges, but they are high in potassium. But 'tis the season for clementines and mandarins. They do have less potassium in them, so those are sometimes an option for you as well. I love clementines this time of year. I tend to buy them a lot when the holidays are approaching. They're a great little snack to have. And again, take advantage of cranberries. So cranberries are not only bright and tasty, they are also low in potassium too. So you can add them into many different meals, not just your dinners, but your baking as well. Eggnog, now this is a popular drink for the holidays, but it is unfortunately high in potassium and phosphorus. So if you're not able to drink it, you can always switch it up for some hot cider or hot apple cider or infused water. But also always remember to monitor your fluid intake if you are somebody who needs to follow fluid restrictions. Okay, so flavorings. We know that seasonings often contain a lot of sodium. But this doesn't mean you have to eat bland food. You can choose no salt added seasonings such as Mrs. Dash, or you can try making your own as well. So instead of adding salt to your meals, try using some herbs and spices to take advantage of those flavors. And some of the traditional holiday seasonings are rosemary, thyme, nutmeg, cardamom, and sage. Okay, so this is a picture of the double boiled mashed potatoes. So this is lower in sodium and potassium when you double boil your potatoes. Again, the link is on the slide here, and that will give you the whole method in detail, but it is very easy and simple to do. This here is a curried turkey casserole. I picked this one because I personally love the colors of the picture. It is low in phosphorus, sodium, and potassium, but it is high protein. So again, you need to talk to your doctor or your registered dietitian about your individual nutrition requirements, because this may not be an option for you if you do need to watch your protein. Another reason why I chose this one is because it's a great way to incorporate some of your leftovers from your turkey dinner if you eat turkey during the holidays. So again, trying to reduce that waste and using those leftovers. This is a great way. Okay, so moving on a little bit, depending on where you're located during this time in COVID, you may or may not be visiting restaurants to dine out. But you can sometimes you can consider ordering takeout from restaurants during the holidays. And if this is something that you do, there are a few things to consider. Many restaurants do have their menu posted online, which can be super helpful when trying to choose what you would like to order for takeout. If you have a favorite restaurant that you tend to visit more often when you choose to dine out, and if you have access to their menu, you can always bring it with you when you're visiting your renal dietitian, and they can help you review your favorite items and then choose the one that best suits your nutritional requirements. If you're unsure of some items on the menu, always ask. For example, if there is a salad on the menu, but they don't list the type of vegetables in it, but you need to monitor some of your potassium intake, always ask the waitress or the waiter, and they can let you know exactly which vegetables you should expect in that salad. And if there are a few in there that you don't want to consume on that particular day, or you need to watch, just simply ask them if it is an option to leave them out. Many restaurants are happy to make small substitutions, so you can substitute some of the vegetables in a salad, or choose things like rice instead of potatoes, or also try to add your your salad dressings, sauces, and gravies on the side. And again, this way you can control exactly how much goes onto your food. And again, don't forget to monitor your fluid intake if you are on a fluid restriction. I know if I dine out, whether that is going to a restaurant or taking it home, I tend to do that with people. And when I do that, you're in conversation, you're talking a lot, and sometimes you don't realize how much you're picking up your drink and taking sips of it. So if you are on a fluid restriction, always just be mindful of that. Kidney-friendly meals on a budget. So eating on a budget is always a relevant topic, but this year it's almost more relevant than ever, especially during the holidays. So there are many different things that you can do to eat healthy or eat those foods that make you feel good and nutritious on a budget. But these are just a few that I'm going to share with you today. So one way that you can try staying on your budget is to make your meals from home. Try preparing larger batches, and you can always freeze your leftovers for future meals and snacks. This cuts down on time as well. So if you are a very busy person and you want to cut down on the time that you are cooking, try to cook in large batches and freeze it. And those are great meals to grab when you're on the go, or if you're running out of time, grab them out of the freezer, thaw, throw them in the microwave or oven, and then you have a great nutritious meal. And also, again, as we said earlier, when you're making your meals from home, you get to control exactly what goes into them. If you're wanting to purchase fresh vegetables and fruits, try to stick with the ones in season, as they tend to be a little bit less expensive. Another option for budget-friendly vegetables and fruits is buying frozen. There is absolutely nothing wrong with frozen vegetables and fruits, as long as they don't come in a mix of sauce or seasonings. A common myth is actually that frozen vegetables and fruits have less nutrients than fresh, and that's not true at all. In fact, sometimes they have more. So definitely consider using frozen vegetables and fruits. Another benefit to them is that they're very shelf stable, and you can use what you need and freeze the rest. So one thing was a life changer for me when I just discovered was diced onions, frozen diced onions. So when I cook right now, I'm typically cooking for two unless I'm batch cooking. So when I am cooking for two, I don't typically use the whole onions. So instead of, standing over an onion, crying from the onion, and then wasting half of it, I actually just use the frozen. I take the package out, take the exact amount of onion that I need out. It's already diced. And then I throw the rest in the freezer. So that's one way to get some kidney-friendly meals on budget and to lower the amount of waste. So also make sure you're always looking at the flyer. Plan your meals based on sale items. If you're stocking up on food, if this is an option for you, you can stock up on items that are on sale and shelf stable. Definitely just because so they don't go to waste. And so this is great for frozen vegetables and fruits if you do have this space in your freezer to store them. And another thing that I do to save money and prevent waste is if I have fresh vegetables and fruits that maybe I bought too many and I'm not going to eat them all before they go too ripe, or if they start getting too ripe earlier than I expected, I throw them in the freezer. This is great for things like fruits and berries. You can take them out later. You can use them for baking, put them in some hot cereal or smoothies as well. They're good that way. And then, of course, work with your food bank staples. So if you are receiving some food from the food bank, sometimes it typically tends to be some canned items, and that is perfectly fine. If you are receiving canned fruits and vegetables, like I said earlier, if you have the choice and they are there, try to choose those with no salt or sugar added. If this is not an option for you, that's totally fine. Just be sure to drain them and rinse them well, and that will get rid of some of that sodium in there. And of course, again, our Kidney Community Kitchen, they have a great resource on there about how to navigate the food bank. So definitely check that out. Okay, so food safety. This is always something that is super, super important. So again, you want to make sure that you are washing your hands well. I'm sure we are all used to washing our hands by now. But after we're doing it for so often, it kind of becomes a habit. We go into autopilot when we're washing our hands. So we really want to remind ourselves to use the proper hand washing technique, and that we are washing our hands for the correct amount of time each time that we wash our hands. And Health Canada is a website that has lots of great resources on this and some diagrams on exactly how to properly wash your hands. So you can definitely check those out. You want to make sure that you're properly sanitizing all of your kitchen surfaces and equipment before you're using it and after you're using it. And I put washing your fresh vegetables and fruits under water here just because there's a really big misconception that you should be using soap or chlorine or other chemicals to wash your vegetables and fruits, and you actually don't want to do this. It is not recommended. In fact, fresh vegetables and fruits are quite porous, and so they can absorb some of those chemicals which then of course we would consume, and we don't want to do that. So you also don't want to soak them in the sink, because your sink itself is a hub for bacteria. So all you need to do, it's simple. You just want to wash them thoroughly under running water, fresh running water. Another thing you want to always make sure to avoid is cross-contamination. So when I think of cross-contamination, I tend to think of raw meat. And so just practicing things like using different cutting boards when you're cutting up your raw meat and your vegetables. And another little trick is to not store your raw meat on a higher shelf in the fridge. So you want to always store it on the bottom, because if you did store it on the higher one and say you had vegetables underneath it, there's always that chance that that raw juice from the meats can drip down and get on your vegetables, and you don't want that to happen. So always store your raw meat on at the bottom of the fridge. And of course, very important, always cook your meats to the recommended safe internal temperatures. All of your foods, cook them to their recommended safe internal temperatures. And I mentioned Health Canada earlier. They have great resources on their website for this, but also the Kitty Community Kitchen has a great resource for food safety as well. They have an excellent table on their resource that shows all of the different safe internal temperatures that you want to cook different types of meats at. So you can definitely check that out. And this isn't on the slide, but you always want to make sure that you're practicing safe measures all of the time. So not just when you're cooking, trying to minimize your risk when you're shopping. You should always try to plan your meals before you go to the grocery store. Take a grocery list with you so that when you are at the grocery store, you know exactly what you're buying, and you won't forget any ingredients or food items, which would cause you to make another trip out to the grocery store. In a lot of grocery stores have delivery services that could be an option for you. And again, always wear personal protective equipment. So this would be things like your mask, and always maintain safe physical distance. It is the holidays. We're not supposed to be going out as often as before, but around this time of year in general, there tends to be more people in the stores. So the stores may be busier than normal times, or times other than the holidays. So definitely always bring your mask and maintain safe physical distance. And with that, the last thing that I really want to stress is to be kind to yourself. Like I said earlier, the renal diet, there's a lot of negative connotations around the word diet in general, but the renal diet, it doesn't have to suck. It is very, very stressful, I can only imagine, but you want to stay happy. We have lots of resources to help you navigate through this diet. And again, I said it many times, but your renal registered dietitian, that is your person to go to. They can help you navigate through all of this. And, now more than ever, especially during a pandemic, we really got to remember to be kind to ourselves. It's stressful times, more stressful than normal. So, you need to honor your body, honor your hunger. Nourishing your body is one part of self-care. We're always hearing about self-care now because it is so important, and nourishing your body is one aspect of self-care. But again, it is just one aspect, and there's so many different ways for or aspects of self-care. So if nutrition for you is a part of self-care that is slightly lower priority, that's okay. There's so many other ways to do self-care. So just remember, always be kind to yourself. And eating should be an enjoyable experience, especially during the holidays. If you are able, I know not all of us are, but if you are able to enjoy them with some family members or some friends, just remember to be kind to yourself. Okay, so that is the end of the webinar. We haven't had a poll in a while, so I do want to put a last poll in here. And let me get it up. Okay, so this is about future webinars. I did notice I got a question in the question box that was asking about our webinars, how often we're going to be doing them. And we're actually going to be aiming to do a webinar once a month, at least once a month. These can be on many different topics, but since today we're talking about nutrition, I'm interested in any other nutrition-related topics that you would be interested in learning about. So I see some people are answering already. You can choose multiple different topics if you'd like to see more than one. Some of the options there are mindful eating, reading labels, and navigating the grocery store. So going into labels in a little bit more detail than we did today, and kind of some tips and tricks when you're going through the grocery store. Diabetes and kidney disease. You know, I talked earlier about how difficult the kidney diet can be, and sometimes, you know, you have to follow another diet on top of that. So diabetes, heart health, and then some renal friendly meals and recipes. If you're interested in that, definitely click that one. Okay, so most people, I think, have voted. And I will close it in 3, 2, 1. And I'll share the results there. Okay, awesome. So there's a lot of people that want the renal friendly meals and recipes. So this is something that we can definitely work on and hopefully we can bring to you in the future. Before I get into questions, I'm running out of time a little bit here, but I will take a quick look at the questions. I probably won't be able to get to all of them, but like I said before, I will take in consideration all of the questions and send you some answers with that follow-up email at the end within 48 hours. So again, you will get a recording of this webinar in that email. You'll also get the PowerPoint slides. So all of those links in those slides to the different resources and the different recipes are included there. You will get those. And again, there will be a little survey link as well. If you have the time, please fill that out. It really helps us to improve webinars in the future. And there's also a place there to give us some ideas on future webinars. So not just nutrition, webinars on any kind of information. So let's look at the questions real quick. Okay, so somebody asked, when looking at sodium in DV, so the percent daily value, how do you track for all days? For all day to make sure I am in the amount my care team says. So this question, when you are looking at the sodium and the percent daily value, again, I mentioned how you have all those percentages. Some people try to add those percentages up. So the percentage in one of sodium in one product and the other one, we don't want to do that. We don't want to add them up. The percent daily value is simply a tool for you when you're looking at a label to help you quickly determine whether or not a product has a lot of sodium in it or a little bit of sodium. So when you're looking to find out how much sodium you actually need exactly in a day, that's something you want to talk to your healthcare provider about, your renal dietitian. Again, your renal dietitian can help you to determine how to add up the amount of sodium you're having in each product so that you can have an idea of how much you are eating during the day. But the percent daily value is just simply a tool to help you be able to look at a package quickly and determine, you know, does this food product have a lot of sodium in it? Should it be something that I should be monitoring? Or does it just have a little bit of sodium in it? Okay. So the baking powder substitution, once you mix it, if a recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of baking powder, how much of the new mix do you use? Is it the same? So it is the same. Once you make that mixture of the phosphorus-free baking powder, you can substitute it in a recipe for how much for how much the baking powder originally was for. So if a recipe asked for, say, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, once you make that phosphorus-free mixture of baking powder, just use the 2 teaspoons. Okay, so can you use something like Splenda to replace sugar? Is it considered safe? So Splenda is something that people do use to help control their, not help control their blood sugars, to use in the place of sugar. This definitely is something that you want to double check with your healthcare provider. It's different for every person. So, you know, when you're using Splenda and sugar, there's different proportions that you want to use as well. So if you get the go-ahead from your health professional, just always read the package to make sure that you're substituting it correctly. But again, definitely ask your healthcare provider for that. Is it better to buy ground flax seeds or should you buy the whole seeds? Honestly, it doesn't really matter. I personally prefer the ground flax seeds because you can't really taste them when they're in things. I can only imagine the whole seeds, you know, unless you blended them up, you would taste them. It might be a little chunky. So I personally get the ground flax seeds. Okay. Is there any chance of a cooking demo? This is a great question, and this is something I am excited about. And that's kind of why I wanted to do that poll at the end of the webinar to see if you guys would be interested in more kidney-friendly recipes. We would love to provide some cooking demos in the future, so definitely stay tuned for that. And so I am a little bit over the time now. I think I talked too much during this, but you guys still had lots of different questions there. So I promise I will take a look at the rest of the questions and I will provide some answers in the follow-up email that you guys will be receiving in about 48 hours, within 48 hours. So again, thank you guys so much for attending the webinar. You can always contact me. My contact information is on the slide here. Feel free to contact me at any time with any kind of questions or, you know, wondering about services. If I'm not sure, I can always navigate you to the person that would be best to talk to. And definitely check out our Kidney Community Kitchen website, our Ask a Dietitian feature. And I hope you guys have a great day. I hope it's not too cold where you are. And thanks again so much.